Why did you launch him 80 feet in the air?
You told me to boat flip him!
I didn't tell you to launch him 78 feet in the air.
I flipped him in the boat, didn't I?
Send it to the moon.
I sent it! You said boat flip him!
Oh, yeah.
Do you fish? No. You know, people who don't fish think that fishing is lazy or boring, but it is the complete opposite. There are 100 little decisions to be made, variables to be considered, and you're never quite sure what made the difference. Did I cast too high, too far to the left? Did I reel it in too slow or too fast? Is the lure too shiny or too dull? Do I stay here or should I go over there? And you know it's not luck, but you do not know by how much. Because I am never, disappointed out here because I don't expect anything, because anything is possible. I can be hopeful out here, even in failure. Because I know if I just go out there around that tree, it might be different. Something might be different. Something I do might make a difference.
On my property, you didn't win shit in my yard.
Wait.
All of you.
Daddy, chill.
What the hell is even that?
You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Monday Night Live. We are almost to that wonderful time of year, which is April. And for most people in Northern Virginia and Maryland and up, that's really the sign of spring. If you're down in Southern Virginia, you know, the pre-spawn is already completely on. I just fished the first time ever this past weekend, the Fountainhead Bass Tournament. Absolutely great lake. We've all heard the rumors from the biologists, like it's the best lake in Virginia. It showed out insanely well. It's a weird format because you're allowed to bring 6 fish in, but still the club record was broken with 36 pounds for 6 fish. I think the largest was an 8-pound largemouth. We had 25 pounds for 6 fish. So the point is, even though it's a weird six fish thing, even if you subtract one, those are some hellish bags coming out of that place. Absolutely a blast. We're getting back into the smallmouth. I'm trying to do better because I've heard people in the comment section about not stacking kayak, and then smallmouth. I'm trying to go between the lakes and the rivers, and I wanted to head back to our roots here with some smallmouth bass fishing, particularly the Upper James, the section of the James and the Jackson that we really don't talk about. And we're bringing back a complete favorite of the show. I'm going to bring him on the show now, Rob England. Rob, how are you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, I'm doing great, Thomas.
Thank you so much for joining me here for a Monday Night Live event.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I'm excited about doing it. This is the first time I've ever done a live event, so I think it's going to be great.
Well, the audience here is very generous. And as always, guys, with this Monday Night Live, ask a good question. And if I pick it, you win a prize to Jake's Bait and Tackle or Tiger Crankbait. So please get those comments going. I know it usually takes about 20 minutes for people to kind of get on in here with their busy days. So we're going to get the introductions out of the way first. You've been on the show a couple of times, but for people that are tuning in for the first time, just a little history. Like, how did you get into the whole guide service, and how did you find the Upper James?
Well, I grew up in Ohio. I'm an avid sports fan. Played football and hockey growing up, and fished a lot when I was a kid. And my grandfather had a cabin on a lake in Ohio called Indian Lake. As a matter of fact, it got hit pretty hard this past week by some tornadoes up in the Ohio area. But at any rate, it was some pretty bad weather up that way. But so as I was graduating high school, I wanted to play some more football. I was a better football player than I was a hockey player. And, Ohio State is kind of that's my favorite, my favorite school. And I just don't have the size or the speed to play somewhere like at Ohio State. So one thing led to another, and I was able to get connected to a place called Ferrum College down here in Virginia, about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour from where I'm at now in Eagle Rock. And so I went down there as a junior college, played a couple years there, football, got my associate's degree. But all the while, I started fishing the James River, the Jackson, the Maury, even the New River a little bit. And just, it was just such a different world from what I grew up in Ohio, because, those man-made lakes up there are kind of shallow. And I caught a lot of different species of fish, but I remember some of the guys that I worked with in the off season, a place called Hill's Department Store, is where I would be working during the summer and the winter. And yeah, man, you ought to go up to, if you like to fish, you need to go up to the James River, you need to go to the Maury, you need to go to the Jackson. You can go out there and catch 100 smallmouth. I'm like, yeah, come on. You don't go out and catch 100 smallmouth, at least where I'm from. And so literally the first time I went out, I caught almost 100 fish. Damn. And that was kind of the beginning of it all. I ended up leaving this area, going to North Carolina, got married, had children, worked for Food Lion in their corporate office. I was in supply chain for many, many years. But, as the years went on, I continued to come back this area and camp with my children during the summertime, like June, when they would get out of school. And I just started thinking about, I've gotten, I think good enough at this that I could probably guide, and that maybe one day I might step away from corporate America and do what I really love to do, and that's take people out and fish.
That's freaking awesome. When people talk about the James, I think, and this is something that I almost need biologists on to talk about, like definition of upper versus lower. Sure. I generally, for the layman, say the non-tidal versus the tidal portion, but then you throw the Maury and the Jackson. How do they work in? Are they tributaries of the James? Is that how that works?
Yeah, so you could basically consider the Jackson River as like the northeast branch of the James River. So it comes out of, it starts above Lake Moomaw, which Lake Moomaw and Gathright Dam was created in the early 80s. So you have Gathright Dam, and then below there, basically you have about 18 miles of trout water now, wild trout water. And then once you get to Covington, it really becomes very prolific, actually, smallmouth fishing. And so it empties into the James right at the right where the cow pasture comes in Iron Gate. So the confluence of the Jackson River and the cow pasture river create the James River, which that is officially the head of the James and the upper James. And that essentially goes from Iron Gate all the way down to Snowden, which is just slightly past Glasgow in Amherst County. And then from there, you then have the middle James, which basically goes from Snowden to Lynchburg. And that's a Piedmont stream, where the upper James is a mountain stream. And then once you get below the fall line in Richmond, you're more in a tidal scenario where you have the lower James. So there's really three different rivers. But what a lot of people probably don't know is that the James River is the longest river in the United States solely within one state's border. And then,
wow.
And then the Maury River starts up in a place called Goshen's Pass. It is just a little trickle trout stream. They stock it up in the headwaters, and the Maury River is about 35 to 40 miles long. Not a long stream, but a very productive stream. And it empties out into the James, so it's a tributary to the James, and it comes in right in the town of Glasgow. So whenever I float, one of my favorite floats, which is called Balcony Falls, from Glasgow to Snowden, I actually put in on the Maury, and it's just a little short turn, and you turn onto the James. So the Jackson and the Maury are both significant tributaries to the James River, upper James River.
When you talk about the Maury, and just for some of my audience that knows like the upper Potomac around Paw Paw or the Shenandoah, are we talking, is it as wide as like the Shenandoah and the upper Potomac up there? Is it bigger? Is it really a stream?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have not fished those streams. I've been over them, so it's hard for me to really gauge that. It's not as wide as the James in most places.
Okay.
I would say in a lot of cases on the Maury, if we are in the middle of the river, that with a really good cast, you can make it to both sides.
Oh, wow.
Of the river. It has to be a good cast. Not always, but in most cases, you can reach both sides of the river. So, I would say 40 yards across, give or take, maybe 50.
That's freaking awesome. And we got 2 questions in here. And then guys, for the people on Instagram, we got about 20 people watching on Instagram right now. Head on over to YouTube, because I can share your comment on the screen. Instagram and StreamYard aren't friends, but I'll read it off now. Angling Outdoors IG says, is the Maury more for wading or kayaking, or both?
Both. Yeah, there's a lot of good places that actually have public access. There's a place called River Road that comes off of Highway 501, just on the other side of Glasgow, and it basically bends down around the Maury River and just follows the Maury River all the way almost into Buena Vista, and then comes right back out on 501. And there are a lot of places along. You just have to be careful, but there's a lot of public access where you can go down and wade. There's a boating access along River Road that is owned by the DNR, and eventually they're talking about maybe making that. They're going to put some gravel there, but you can float from there down to Locker Landing. You can put in at Glen Maury Park and float down to River Road, or you can cover if you want to cover that whole stretch. It's about 12 miles, and then there's a put in at Jordan's Point Park, which is actually in the town of Lexington, and you can take out on right above Route 60, which is in Buena Vista, and you can't really go past there because there's a fairly large dam there. I've heard them, possibly taking that out. There was one in Lexington that they took out a couple years ago, so they may end up taking that one out in Buena Vista as well. So there's 3-4 really good floats on the Maury.
And then angling, outdoor adventure, message me on Instagram, Facebook, or email me fishingthedmv@gmail.com. You just want a gift card to Tiger Crankbaits. We got another question here before we kind of get more into the show. Matt Miller on YouTube says, Matt Miller, how is the fishing around James River State Park? We went camping there last summer, but didn't have time to fish.
I believe that's in the Natural Bridge area, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, very good. Now it's not what it used to be, and I think I may have talked about this a few times on previous podcasts, but we had a couple bad spawns, 18, 19, and 20. 2018, 19, 20, and then there's a flathead catfish issue that needs to be addressed. So, we don't have the prolific numbers in that stretch as we used to, but it's still a very viable fishery. There's an access point, a place called Alpine. So there's a big farm. It looks like something out of a movie, Alpine Farms, and you can put it in at Alpine Farms and float down to either Jellystone Park right there in Natural Bridge. You can take out right there, or you can go a little bit further. There's a place called Wilderness Canoe. A friend of mine runs that, and he typically if you're camping at his location, you can absolutely take out there. If you're not camping, you might have to get permission to take out there at Wilderness Canoe.
There was a photo floating around the internet from, I think it was like Blue Ridge Musky, of an absolute massive smallmouth caught out of the upper James. And I feel like if you don't live in the area, that captures the hearts and minds where this river is an absolute just slugfest, Susquehanna level. There's tons of big fish. And really want to kind of get to like where the truth is. Where is the smallmouth population in 2024 compared to years prior?
It would be hard to gauge just yet. To be completely honest with you, I've been running musky trips just like crazy since February. So haven't really got into the smallmouth yet. As a matter of fact, I've been out scouting a couple times, but did my first official, guided smallmouth trip on Saturday. Oh, wow. We did okay. Not great, but I had a couple, beginner fishermen, so that created, some challenges of itself there. But based on last year, I would say the spring's going to be very good. I think the last couple of years, the spawns have been good. The numbers have been good. I wouldn't say they're prolific or terrific, but we've got a lot of big fish in the river, and we've got a lot of small fish in the river. We're just kind of missing some of those in-between fish. But I'm expecting a really good spring. Now, the key to the whole thing is, weather and water conditions. And right now, we have really good water conditions. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that, that's going to continue for the rest of the year.
When was the flip where it really did become like the musky capital of Virginia, quote unquote? Was it always that way with the James, or was it just over time it built that reputation up to where it is today?
Yeah, it took time. So, there were some native fish here, but, they were rare. And then there was a pretty aggressive stocking program in the 90s to really build the population. But I would say in the last, 15 years or so, it has really just absolutely caught fire. We're running about an 80% success rate since February. I was out yesterday. We had to work really, really hard because it was, I don't know about where you are, but it's been windy. It was windy yesterday, windy today. It's supposed to be really windy the next couple of days. And we really had to battle, but we finally struck gold about 2:00 and got about a 40-inch fish in the boat.
It's interesting. I had Ethan of New River Guides, and he talked about the DWR surveys and about each river. And he talked about like the James has like, it's like so many muskie per acre. And then he said like the New River has almost too many now. Is that something that could ever happen to like the James? Like, is overpopulation ever possible for muskie in general?
That's a great question. I don't know that I could answer that. What concerns me a little bit, and I think it can, any fisherman or guide is going to be concerned is, pressure and overfishing. So yesterday we were going to do one particular float, and as we were pulling up, there were already 2 vehicles there launching, and I told my clients, I'm like, look, I don't really want to fight for river position with these other 2, so we're going to go upriver a little further. So I think that's always possible. I think everything kind of goes in cycles. Just like in the 90s and the 2000s, we just had this prolific smallmouth. I mean, big fish days, and big fish, and then we had the fish kill in 2007 or 2008. And then we've had some bad spawns. So I think the same could go for muskie, but I will say the population is extremely strong. I mean, like I said, we're running 80% this year. Last May, I ran 100% in the month of May. There's just a lot, and I'm not saying that's just because of my guiding. I think the population's there. If you're in the right place at the right time, you got the right bait, your success rate's just it's going to go up.
Yeah, it's just insane to me because I never thought about that till Ethan talked about it. Where when he does smallmouth trips, it's ridiculous, like how many like jerk baits you'll lose because there's so many muskie. And I never thought about that from catfish. Like we've heard the things about like there's too many catfish in the river. It's like, well, I've never heard of an example of like people like, oh, there's just too many muskie. And I wonder if it's just their breeding where like they won't overpopulate a thing because of how they behave, their fish behavior. It's just not in them. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I can't say with certainty for sure, unless I talk to somebody, in the game and fish and got some, direct information from them. All I can do is kind of speculate about that. Like I said, it's always possible. And like, it's just the last couple of years I've been extremely blessed to have such great success. And, that great success, in turn makes happy clients.
And then we got a couple of, actually on topic here, we got a couple of muskie questions. We got JP. JP says, what time of year is best for muskie on the upper James? And what are the preferred baits? Any certain hot colors or patterns? That's a good segue to some of the baits that we have. And then guys, hit the like button and it helps us out in the algorithm. Please, it helps.
Sure. So, it kind of depends on, there's really 3 good seasons for muskie. You've got pre-spawn, which, will start, and that'll start in February, and that will run, we've probably got about a week left. I'm, again, crossing my fingers, hoping that we, can make it another, because I've got a couple more muskie trips. So right about the end of March, right at the beginning of April, they're going to spawn out, and we're going to leave them alone for the month of April. And then typically the last week of April, first week of May through June, like I said, last year was just insane. So a lot of people like that post spawn, to your point just a few minutes ago about, losing jerk baits and stuff like that. They are very opportunistic during May and June because they're hungry. And I mean, we've caught them on crankbaits, we've caught them on jerk baits, we've caught them on Ned rigs. And that's when a lot of people accidentally catch them. They'll accidentally catch them now too, but definitely in that period of time. And the other thing people like about post spawn is you can have a t-shirt on, you can have shorts on. The weather's usually pretty good. February and March can that's for the got to be kind of hardy to be going someday. Like me and a client went out a couple weeks ago before I went to spring training, and it was 21 degrees, and it wasn't even 30 degrees. And he had a hit, a follow, and he boated a fish within the first like 30 minutes. So that's not for everybody. And then you've got the fall season. And usually, once we get into June and the water temperature gets, around 70, 75 degrees, we're done for the summer. And then usually by the last week of September, it starts to come back. And, again, keeping our fingers crossed that this fall we've had 2 straight years of really low water, and it really hurt the muskie last year. I mean, just the lack of oxygen. They were just really lethargic. But typically that is a great time, right? From end of September, 1st of October, all the way to Thanksgiving. And then, there's the winter season, which I'm not a big fan of that myself. I just don't want to go out there when it's, 35-degree day. But, if clients want to go, we're going to go. But so when is the best time? I'll go back to saying it's it depends on what you're looking for. Now, pre-spawning is like really, really big fish, fish of a lifetime type thing. Now, they're not going to get any smaller in, lengthwise in May. They're going to lose a little bit of weight. But, musky fishing is never easy, but it's a little easier, in the post-spawn, just because they're going, if you're in the right spot and there's musky there, they're going after something. And then in fall, my theory on fall fishing, whether it be smallmouth or musky, is their attitude and behavior changes because mature fish begin to recognize that water's getting colder, the days are getting shorter, and they eat because they have to, and they just get a really nasty disposition about them, and they're angry, so they're pretty aggressive in the fall.
And then we got a couple more musky questions here, guys. So I'll make sure we get those answered before we segue again.
Baits too, if you want.
Oh yeah, go for it. Absolutely, go for it.
All right, so I'm going to show this one bait here. This is called a prime suspect, and I want to give I want to show this example. Hopefully, people can see it right there. This is my buddy Dennis Perko that I've talked about several times. He makes this bait. This is like a 7.5 inch. It's called prime suspect. Got a little curly tail on the back of it. But if you can see it here, I'm going to really put it up close. This bait has caught probably 10 to 15 fish. You can see all the teeth marks on it. I mean, they just absolutely crush this thing. And this size is one of the sizes that I really like for the post spawn. This is about a 7.5 inch. And then here is that same bait, which we're kind of using now and probably will go to in the fall, prime suspect. And this is more of an 8-inch bait. And there's somewhere on here. Yeah, you can see right there. We caught a fish right there and got a chunk taken out of right there where my finger is. If you can see that. Well, can you see that? Yeah.
Yeah, I can see it. Wow.
Okay. Yeah. So different color. This is Mad Tom. I call this guy Mellow Yellow. I mean, he doesn't really name the colors. I just kind of make up the colors. Then there's he's got these jointed baits. This is called a grid search. Once again, this is the Mad Tom pattern. You can see this one also has been hammered to death.
She's seen some wars. She has seen some wars.
Yeah. Missing an eyeball right there. Got the eyeball taken out. And then, so again, that's a good size. And even the tail's gotten shaved off there. So comparison to that's again, a good post spawn bait size right there, about a 7-inch bait. And then it's kind of a walleye pattern, even though we don't have walleye in the river. It looks like a sucker too, but this is an 8-inch bait. And one of the things I may have mentioned before, but Dennis puts these tracking strips on these baits, which is real cool. One, this helps if you get it snagged. These baits are probably about $100, give or take, maybe 125. So you can see this bait from a long distance, but it also in the water, as it's moving through the water, you can track the bait and make sure it's tracking appropriately. And then a couple glide baits. This one's called the Hitman, and it's got those tracking strips on it and painted like in the smallmouth pattern. This is real. I mean, glide baits are just really, really smoking hot right now. And then a little bit of a different style, but this is like a hog-nosed sucker right here, which is and maybe like a fall fish. So you can see one of the things you might notice in a lot of these baits, there's a common theme in colors.
Yes.
Green, brown, gold, orange. For me, in my experience, those seem to be the best colors. I'm not saying they're the only colors that will catch, musky, but they seem to be, really the ones. And then this will transition a little bit over into smallmouth. Dennis started making these these little 5.5 inch. Now we're going to use these for smallmouth this year, but you can even probably throw these during post spawn. But we've got he mimicked the bandit, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. That is a great square bill.
It's a beautiful color. Oh, I love that color. Oh.
Then again, the Mad Tom, the brown and gold. I mean, this is just one of the best color patterns that we've ever used. Is the brown and gold. Again, this is a kind of a little walleye pattern right here. Brown and gold.
Wow.
And this one right here is kind of like a bluegill or a rock bass, a little bit of a different shade of color that we typically use, but I think that's going to be a good one. So that's some of my favorite baits that we're using for musky and even some smallmouth stuff there too.
So much of it is glides, and I've gone on 1 or 2 musky trips back when I was younger, and you had a lot of jigs, tubes, ribbon tail style swim baits. It feels like everything's now full glide. How much of it is it's the flavor of the month, like the Whopper Plopper used to be, and how much of it is like, no, like legit, this is just all you should be throwing?
Well, I absolutely believe fish get conditioned to certain things. I remember, when the fluke craze was on, and I think that's still a viable bait for, it's drifting a fluke or, just using it like as kind of a jerk bait. But I think that, I don't think smallmouth especially have seen many glide baits. And I think that's why it's gotten really hot for smallmouth is, that's just kind of new on the scene. Probably been on the scene for musky for a little while. I think there's a lot of them out there, but they seem to do really well. And, there's some different things that you can do with the glides. I mean, you can make that bait go a little slower. You can make it go, a little faster and a little more erratic. But I do think that it kind of goes both ways. I think sometimes it's the fish get conditioned to it. And then I think, from a marketing standpoint, I always say, it's more about catching the fisherman than it is catching the fish. So, sometimes, marketing, kind of will push a certain thing and, it may or may not be good, but like, for instance, the Ned rig, I mean, that there's so many different versions of the Ned rig right now for smallmouth. And, but it just flat out produces. And I think that's going to be a viable bait for a long time. Some have a longer shelf life than others.
Yeah, it's weird because I had a fun conversation about that the other day about like the Cinco just feels like no matter what in 1,000 years, that sucker is not a fad. It's going to still work. And I do think there are those bread and butters, like you can use those. Let's see. We had a couple more musky questions. We will bang out right here. We got Lance Gray. Do muskie have a good topwater bite, or is there a good topwater bite for muskies?
There is. In my opinion, it's like smallmouth. I mean, you can catch smallmouth on topwater just about any time of year, but there's really a particular time of the year when it gets really hot. For smallmouth, it's usually in that post spawn, and the same thing for muskie. In that post spawn, again, they're very opportunistic. The water's, starting to, increase in temperature, and they're pretty active. So yeah, I would say that May to middle of June, once again, about the middle of June is when we cut it off. So that 6-week period of time is a really good time for topwater. And then probably maybe that first week or two in the fall, when, you're still you're just into, the first week or two of fall, late September, early October, water's still, fairly clear. That's a good time as well.
And Lance, you just won a gift card to Jake's Bait and Tackle. Please message me on Instagram, Facebook, or email me fishingthedmv@gmail.com, and I'll get that out to you this week. Let's see. We had another one there. I think it was from JP. Let me make sure. Boop, boop, boop. There he is. Okay. Does he throw any inline spinners for muskie?
I do. Not a lot, but once again, I would, for the most part, when it comes to the inline spinners, that's a post spawn bait for me. That May to June timeframe. You can throw it at other times, obviously, but I think that's the time that they, again, being opportunistic, they will really hunt down a inline spinner. And I like, something they call them double showgirls. I've got some custom ones. The guy, I think I have a guy in Wisconsin that I get some inline spinners from. But yeah, I use some pretty big ones, and then sometimes we'll size down a little bit as we get later into that post spawn and go with a little bit smaller one.
Guys, again, hit that like button. It really helps us out in the algorithm to make sure more people find this show. Right now, we're up to 48 people watching. I know you guys are slow today, probably getting back from the water. I'm just going to keep going through these questions to play catch up. He's right about, this is more of a statement. He's right about the glide baits for smallmouth. No, 100% that's catching on right now. Pink Nation, hit that like button, y'all. Absolutely. Sinkos will never stop producing. Oh, no way in hell. Sinkos, tubes, Ned rigs, that stuff, as long as you live, they will catch fish. Brew Tank Outdoors. Did he say $120 a bait? I have a $300 glide bait that doesn't work for shit I bought. So yeah, that's cheap.
Yeah, this guy right here, probably this is the prime suspect with that curly tail on it. I think this one was 150. These grid search right here, these multi-segmented baits, I think this one's probably right around 125. And to be completely honest with you, I mean, if I go back, several years, I would have never, ever in a million years thought about spending that kind of money on bait. But these produce. I mean, when people, are booking you for trips and, they're paying you to get them on fish. If this is producing, I'm gonna put out the money to buy these baits. And, and I'm also fortunate he's a good friend of mine. He lives like 5 minutes from me. We fish together a lot, so we get a chance to go out and test these baits a lot. And he will not sell a bait until he knows 100% that thing is exactly right, and he stands behind his work.
Dude, that is, I love it. And you guys like the musky questions. Yeah, keep it up. If you guys want more musky people on the show, I got contacts. I'll get them on there as well. Let's see. I'm just gonna keep going all through these. I'm a musky novice, and this is great information. Absolutely, JP. Jonathan, if you could, this is a great, if you could only have one bait for musky, what would it be? And don't worry, we'll eventually get to the smallmouth fishing, guys. No worries. We'll skip this out of the way.
It's going to be that prime suspect. I mean, here's a little bit smaller version of that. But this prime suspect right here for me.
Ooh, pretty.
That's 7-inch. Man, and I gave that example earlier. This one right here, you can see that thing's been just annihilated. I mean, I'm about ready to retire this guy right here because it's or get it repainted completely, have it sanded and repainted. But yeah, this hard bait right here, and what's really cool about this bait right here is you can do, while it's just a straight on throw out and retrieve. If you have the tail back here, if you turn the tail up like this, the bait will actually have a wobble as it's coming in. It's hard for me to get the right camera, but it'll kind of wobble as it's coming in. If you turn the tail down like that, it's just going to come straight in. It's weird. Sometimes the muskie want it exactly straight, and sometimes they want that little wobble to it as it's coming in. We all you have to do is just take the tail and turn it around, and then you get the tail turned down, or you can go like that and turn the tail up, and you get a whole different action in the bait. But yeah, if I had one bait, it's going to be this one right here.
That's freaking awesome.
Either the 7 or the 8.5 here.
Yeah, it's hard, guys, like with a lot of this stuff, and this is just with streaming in general, to just grasp size of some of these baits. It's insane how, I don't know, like I was completely wrong about the whole glide bait thing, because I truly thought the price and the size would be a barrier to entry, and that would it would keep it very niche. Completely wrong. People really are just digging, not only like they're okay with spending the money, but they're actually going to go do it. A lot of people are committing to it, which is fascinating to me. Let's see. Here we go. One cast, one fish. Anyone targeting musky from a kayak down there? Any kayak musky tips? Guys in the chat, if you know, come on, comment. That's interesting.
Yeah, I see them. But I have a 15-foot Rocky Mountain raft, so
that helps.
I can't really speak too much to anybody in particular that I know that does it, but I have seen some people out there doing it. How much success they have doing it, I really don't know.
The best tip I ever heard, which is a very simplistic tip for anyone getting a musky fishing, the number one piece of tackle you need is a net, the right size net for controlling the fish. Yes. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah. So I'm not a real big guy. I'm about 5'7", 180. I can stand up in my net.
Good Lord.
It's called a super slimer net. And I learned the hard way that I needed a net that big. I lost a couple fish.
Oh,
But and I'm not just promoting that brand.
yeah.
But the super slime, Musky have a real thick slime on them, and it's a protective slime for the fish, and those nets are designed to protect that slime on the fish. Plus, it has a real deep basket in it. Therefore, you can, even if you catch a really big fish, you can keep that fish in the water until you get the hook out of its mouth. Otherwise, if you have a small net, you might have to hoist that fish in the boat, and then it becomes dangerous for the fish, especially as it gets warmer.
Yeah, and that's very important. If you guys are trying to do this from a kayak or something like that, you really need a way to be able to control and handle the fish. Because this gets into Lance's question here, which is what is the average size of the muskie and the James? I mean, if you've never caught one before, these are big freaking animals.
Yeah. The citation size for a muskie is 40 inches or 15 pounds, and the better percentage of our fish are 40 and above. I mean, we do catch fish in the 30s. But I would say 75% of our fish are over 40 inches. So yeah, they're big fish. And our biggest one to date is 53 that we caught last year.
That's insane. Yeah, that's freaking awesome.
It was a big fish.
When is, and really just kind of like to put a bow on the muskie talk, is what is the efficacy or people's thoughts around fishing muskie during the spawn and into the summertime? Because I know that I'm dabbling in the muskie community because of the show. There's some controversy over that, correct?
Well, I probably. I just know for me and the guides that I talk to, we are all pretty consistent in the fact that once that water temperature gets, right around 75, we're done. Because what happens is, muskie, they will fight you to their death. They will give you everything they got. That's why they're so attractive to people. It's just a tremendous game fish, and they get, just like humans. I'm a runner, and what makes you sore from running is, you cross your lactic acid threshold in your muscles, and that lactic acid comes out of your muscle, and then your muscles get real sore. Same thing happens to muskie, and you might land the muskie in July, water temperature is over 80 degrees. You turn that fish back and it looks fine. 2 days later, it dies because it's exceeded its it can't replace that lactic acid because of the hot water. And as a runner, what restores the lactic acid for me a lot of times when I do long runs is I take an ice bath, and they don't have the ability to find cold water. They'll go deeper, or maybe try to find a spring or a creek or something that they can find cooler water. And and I'm not saying every fish dies when you catch them in the summer. That's not the case. But is there controversy about it? Probably. And if you hook one, well, you're probably going to try to catch it. I don't know, somebody's just going to take a nippers and say, I'm not going to try to catch that fish. Well, yeah, probably going to try to catch it, but we don't try. We just leave them alone. And then, and the same thing goes for when I have a pretty good idea that they've spawned, I'm not targeting the muskie, because they're going to be guarding the nest, and and the fry and everything, and I just think it's the right thing to do for me, and I think a lot of other guides feel the same way, that we kind of leave them alone from that. Well, probably a week from now until maybe the end of April, last week April.
Interesting stuff, guys. Guys, again, hit that like button. It really helps us out in the algorithm. We got a great question here, which kind of like segues into smallmouth stuff, from Travis Cyber. Travis, how often do you fish the Jackson? I've only fished where it comes into Moomaw, and we had a blast. Love fishing Moomaw. My grandfather helped build the Gathright. Dam. Interesting.
Oh, that's cool. I used up there. I used to fish it a lot more. This year, I am no longer, at least for now, advertising trout guiding trips, just because my muskie business has gotten so big, and I can be at the muskie launch in 5 minutes. I mean, the James River runs right behind my house.
So people that aren't aware, then the Jackson is primarily known as a trout fishery.
So you've got from Gathright down to the paper plant, which is about 18 miles. And yes, it's a very good wild trout stream. But
Gotcha.
from the paper plant down to where the cow pasture is, and especially like right there at just right kind of in the middle of the city limits of Covington, down to an area called Lowmore, and in that area, man, if you want to catch a lot of smallmouth, now you may not catch some giant fish, but I've had well over 100 fish days on the Jackson. So
wow, damn,
I fish it a lot.
That's really cool. Yeah, because and that's like until I started talking to you and Rob of the James River Keepers. It's kind of like the New River vibe because you have a dam there and the lake is so deep, whether it's Claytor Lake or Moomaw, that water temperature up there is so much cooler than anywhere else. Does that affect the smallmouth at all? Like from that portion, and as you get into the more of the warmer, lower upper Potomac, their spawning habits versus pre-spawn up near the paper mill versus pre-spawn down. And does that help you with your guiding because you can kind of move around?
Absolutely. Yeah. You can always count on the Jackson. So if the smallmouth have already spawned on the James and the Maury, I can usually go up on the Jackson, and it's usually 5 to 10 degrees colder up that way, and I can still catch smallmouth a little bit later, and then they're gonna spawn a little later, and then the smallmouth will start coming back on the James. So yeah, it kind of works out. It kind of works out nicely. It fills in the gaps a little bit.
That's really cool. And so just kind of like then breaking that down for like the smallmouth guys, what temperatures are you looking for just really to be go time, baby, for like pre-spawn smallmouth getting into the spawn? What are you looking for?
Once that water temperature hits 50 degrees, man, it's go time. We're probably on the Maury and the James, probably 55, 56-ish right now. And, like I said, I haven't run a whole lot of smallmouth trips just yet. But some of my friends, one of my friends was out the other day, and man, they just were killing the big fish.
Wow.
So I would say for me that around 56 to 58 is really the magic number for big smallmouth. I mean, you can get good weather, good water, 56 to 58 degrees. You're gonna if you know what you're doing and know where the fish are, you're gonna have a pretty good day.
How does the water? Not water. Sorry. How does the river fish comparatively to, and it could just be anecdotally, like the New River, the Shenandoah, like how does it fish and how does it set up, generally speaking? Are they pretty much all the same?
Well, again, I've never fished the Shenandoah. I fished the New, James, Maury, Jackson. Yeah, I would say for the most part, they do fish the same. The trends of the fish and how they move from pre-spawn to post-spawn and into the fall and where you find them, pretty common. I mean, if you know the movements of smallmouth and you go to all those 4 rivers I mentioned, you're going to probably have success in just about all the same places on all the rivers. The ledges, one of the real key factors of all these rivers is there's a lot of ledge rock where you'll have a slanted rock and it breaks the current and you'll find, big fish right dead smack in the middle of the river where, largemouth typically you'll find, around the banks and it's not that you won't find smallmouth around the banks, but, some of the biggest fish we catch are, in the middle of the river, deep pools, the big, some of the areas I call like potholes. So you'll be going along and you'll have about, 3 or 4 feet average, and all of a sudden you get this hole and you'll find a bunch of smallmouth. And the thing too about, and I might be getting off topic a little bit, but the thing that I find this time of year too in pre-spawn is that fish have a tendency, the smallmouth, while they don't really school, they have a tendency to bunch up this time of year. Mm-hmm. So if you happen to catch 1 or 2 fish, put your anchor down and keep fishing that spot because it's probably going to be pretty good. I remember an example last year. We were over on the Maury and we were throwing a crankbait and guy caught 2 fish and I threw the anchor down and then we switched over to a jig, Ned rig. And I think he caught like 7 or 8 fish just out of one spot. I mean, literally 10 yards.
I am sorry guys, I apologize. I'm like this tonight. I'm just not good with direction, but I think the James is west to east traveling. And so I'm thinking with wind up here on the upper Potomac and even the tidal river, that wind blows the right direction. It sucks. It just, it makes it terrible.
Oh,
can you
yes.
still fish it, or is it like, you're kind of done ski for the day because it gets so chopped up?
Yeah. I have found I was talking about yesterday. I mean, I was pretty fortunate, I think, that, for us to land a muskie yesterday. But for one, it makes it just really hard to fish in general if you have a really windy day, because, the wind is grabbing your bait and you're having a hard time really putting it where you want and really getting, a great presentation. And then, the fact that I have a raft and I don't have a motor, getting good boat position can be murder. I mean, I was so sore yesterday and last night and this morning. I mean, I felt like I had been at the gym all day long. Well, I was at the gym all day long. Basically, I was just at a different gym. But, you get a headwind. So it kind of depends. I think once, at least in my experience, once you get that wind around 10 to 15 miles an hour, it gets really tough. I'm not saying you can't catch fish, but it gets really tough. And, and there's always that thing about, when it starts to get warmer and you have a warm front approaching and you kind of get a warm breeze, not like a gusty wind, but if you get a warm breeze, that could be really good for fishing. Conversely, if you got a cold front coming and you start having that wind come from the north or the east, you might as well just pack it up and probably go home or not go at all.
Smallmouth, and we all everyone in the chat will probably give me anecdotal examples of this, and 100% about smallmouth biting in muddy, murky water. I do feel like they are sight feeders, generally speaking. And so when you go from a semi-clear to there's some chop on the water, how do they completely shut off, or do you really just have to go to the chatterbaits, hot colored crankbaits, and then just kind of work a couple of bites? And do you just completely get rid of bottom bouncing baits entirely when you get that kind of turbidity in the water?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Are you talking about from a wind perspective, or are you talking?
Ooh,
are you talking about from a water level perspective? Because you've had rain or both. Kind of depends.
That is okay. So going down this rabbit hole, I feel like with the wind, it's more of an instantaneous thing, because water rising, unless it's a flash flood, you're going to have a couple of hours or days that builds. So I'm really thinking from a wind perspective first, and then we can talk about water.
Yeah. So from a wind perspective, I'm probably going to be throwing crankbaits, spinner baits, that, something a little heavier that you can cut the wind through. And that will also, create some vibration that, because the fish not only are sight, but they feel too. They've got those lateral lines on their bodies, and they feel that, they feel vibration. So they'll hunt something down that's got some vibration and some flash to it. So yeah, I'm pretty much in a windy condition, I'm abandoning plastic baits, and thus, I might throw a heavy jig, like at the mouth of a creek or a spring or something like that. But generally speaking, I'm going to be throwing, crankbaits and spinner baits and stuff like that.
Now, what if the water's rising?
Man, you can, if you catch it just right. Now, the key to rising water is how and where the water hits the watershed, and how the speed at which the level comes up. To your point, if you have a flash flood, you probably don't want to be out there. That's dangerous. But if you get a rain to the fact that you start to see this gradual incline in the water levels, there can be a real sweet spot in there where that water's rising, because when the water rises, everything starts to move. Your bait fish starts to move. You might get some type of, some hatches and stuff. And so it's just, and it's in there. And I probably talked about this before, but it's in all fish's nature to chase things.
Yeah.
And the fact that we had that really low water last year and we had a lack of oxygen, they weren't chasing anything. I mean, you had to put it right there. But when that water starts coming up, especially like to that example, if you have a long, prolonged, low water event, and then all of a sudden the water starts rising from, man, that is go time, because those fish are just waiting for that. Oxygen's coming in, food's moving, and man, you can really catch it really good. On the flip side of that, let's say you have a high water event, and you're going to get to a level that might be unsafe and it's not going to be really productive. But as you come down the other side and the water starts coming down, there's this, I don't know how it is maybe where you are, but we get this kind of greenish color to the water that almost looks like glacier melt.
Interesting.
It's kind of a turquoise color. That's go time for me. When I see that, not on the brown side, because there's a certain timing there where it might be a little more brown than it is green. But once you get to that little more of a green tint to it, man, I mean, that is good for muskie. That's good for smallmouth. And I'm like, I got to go. That's the time to get out there.
It's so fascinating. This is why for you guys that did, I think it's still listed on the channel. We tried to live stream the tournament yesterday, and one thing that we made the comment of when we were fishing it is the water at the res was dirty and it was overcast for 3 hours of the day. A friend of mine was using a bright white glide bait, and he worked this thing back to the boat and started to talk to me. And while the bait was sitting right next to the boat, 4-pounder blows it out of the water next to the boat. We get him in. Well, later in the day, he throws that same bait, and a fish comes straight up, sees the boat and the bait, and then boils at it and misses it. The only thing that changed, though, is it became bright bluebird out. And that little detail there, and then what he did, which I think was smart, is he changed to a natural pattern, and he caught 2 more in the day. It's so subtle, but really those conditions can really play, and you got to adapt immediately.
Yeah. I like, if the water's stained, I have a tendency to lean toward darker colors. And then when the water's clear or bluebird, I'll tend to go to lighter colors. And the bait we caught the muskie on yesterday, had some flash to it, had some wobble to it. And, the wind did calm down a little bit. So when we finally did get that fish, the wind had backed off some, and I think that helped us too. But spinner baits, it's got that, they got the blade spinning, or like a jerk bait that I like these Rapala jerk baits right here.
Ooh, pretty color.
Yeah. And this thing, when you got that erratic action, when it jerk, you're snapping it around, and as that thing does this turn right here, you start to get that flash from the sun, and that'll really draw the fish in.
And we're gonna get to smallmouth baits here, and I want to get through all of them. This one question that popped in my head: compare and contrast with all of your experience, just in general, muskie and smallmouth. Which one will strike out at hot colors more often? It's classic with smallmouth that, like, you throw a chartreuse or pink, hot pink, sometimes, man, they will just freaking attack it, which is interesting. Like, are muskie that way, or do they prefer it to like look perfectly natural? He lost his audio there, which kind of happens sometimes. So, guys, what I'm going to do is and all you got to do, Rob, just log in and log out and log right back in. It's no big deal. While he does that, I can answer this one question. Where'd it go? I got another question it was particularly for me. It was about the tournament. There it is. Okay, we're going to be pulling that question up here in a minute. So Rob just has to re-enter the chat, and then he'll be fine. So just re-enter the chat real quick, Rob, and then you'll be back up. But Degenerate Fisherman says, Thomas, how did you all end up doing Sunday? So we did actually extremely good in that tournament. I'm gonna bring the weights up here because people have been asking about them. And let me make sure I message old Rob. Here we go. Log back in. There we go. Smiley face. Perfect. So anyway, let me pull this up for you guys real quick. I have the weigh-ins for the top couple of teams here that I really wanted to show off. And then this was from the Res tournament. Let me get the screen presentation here. And I'm going to show this off real quick. I see Rob is back in the queue, but this question came up. So here it is. So there we go. When it comes to the tournament weights and everything, I don't know if you guys can see that okay there. But the winning weight for yesterday with 6 fish was 35 pounds. Number 2 was 29.9. Stokes had 28.78, 27.59. And then we came in, they butchered the hell out of my last name. It looks like he had a stroke. but 25.04 is what we had. Really great rates. And then we'll have a separate, maybe live stream or something later on to be talking about that. But we got him back up here.
Sorry,
So,
somebody tried to call me on my phone, and the audio just went after the call. I tried to. And then I apologize for that.
No big deal. The power of editing when we re-upload this, nothing happened. So we do have a couple of questions here. Let me get that. Let me go here. Let's see. I did work on a red chatterbait on Sunday during the super windy weather. Couldn't get bit on a jig or any bottom baits. Yeah, when it gets to, and this is something big, and this is where I do think live scope is cool from a fish biology standpoint. It tells you their activity level. And even on Sunday, early in the day before the sun came out, you saw so much more freaking activity. You saw minnows and shad moving around. As soon as that sun pulled out, especially Sunday was hot, at least where we were, everything died. Everything went down and got compressed. And I think that's something that some of those wives' tales about the wind and the weather are true. Like when it's cloudy out, they're hunting, generally speaking. When that sun beats out, man, they get tight to the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
I
agree with that.
But yeah, smallmouth baits. Generally speaking, this time of year, what are you had the jerk bait? Is there anything else you like to throw?
Yeah, so I'm going to show you 3 of my favorite crankbaits right here, and my favorite one of all. This little guy right here is called the Bandit Bait Company, and this is the crawdad with orange belly, and we've probably caught more citation smallmouth on this bait this time of year than any other bait. And if I get it real close, it'd probably be hard to see here a little bit, but you can see some teeth marks on this bait.
Yes.
Musky have grabbed this bait many, many times.
Wow.
And this one in particular, during, how I talked about the post spawn and Musky being very opportunistic. We've caught our fair share of Musky on this one right here, but that's probably my favorite go-to. I think this one is a Kevin Van Dam.
Oh, I love that color.
Yeah, and the common thread to all of these is they look like crawdads. There's some crawdad very brown and orange, brown, orange, and gold. But all of these are they're all square bills. I don't typically use for the river. I don't use anything other than a square bill. You see the Bandit also had a square bill on it. And these run, anywhere from 3 to 5, 4 to 6 feet. And then this one, Cotton Cordell, has been around forever. And I haven't used a lot of Cotton Cordell baits, but see if I can get this one where you can really see it well. But you can see this kind of got an olive green with an orange belly to it. Man, we've really done well on that bait. So those are probably my 3 favorite crankbaits. All run about the same. This time, as the water's still fairly cool. We're just a kind of a slow, steady crank. We might pause it a little bit and then start it going again, try, some different things with it. But generally speaking, just kind of a slow, steady retrieve. And, as the afternoon, if you have a really warm day, you can probably speed it up a little bit in the afternoons, if you start seeing them chase and get a little more active. So from a crankbait perspective, those are my favorite crankbaits. I showed some jerk baits. One of the common theme that you'll see in my jerk baits is that a little bit of a different color variation, more leaning toward some blue and greens, and you can see how that one also sun hits this one, and it doesn't just produce when the sun's
beautiful
out.
Color.
Yeah, and these are fairly large too. This one here is probably 5 inches, and I like to throw a little bigger this time of year, and this one's a little bit more on the olive green side, but it's also got that little prism shimmer in it. So those are kind of my favorite crankbaits. And then they got this little swim bait here too. It's not a glide bait, it's just kind of a swim bait. So again, kind of leaning toward that silver, blue, greenish color. So those are kind of my favorites. Then I talked about these a little while ago. So we're gonna this will be the first year that we're really kind of throwing these more. Never really thrown them much in the past, but these are glide baits, and I've got 4 different variations of these that we're really gonna throw here in the spring and the fall a lot.
And just to reiterate, are those glide baits that you just held up? That's something that's at your website, correct?
It's not on my website. We're gonna do a hyperlink on my website, but yeah, you just go to Perko Lures, Perko. and he's got all these different variations of baits. I mean, he's even switching back over to Musky. He recently made a bait called a Mega, and it's a big it's a version of this bait right here. And I think it's 24 ounces. The thing looks like a whale throwing it in the water. It's crazy.
And just for clarity, because like somebody asked in the chat, could you hold this that big one and small one side by side just for comparison? Because you guys got to understand that these things are freaking massive.
Yeah.
Good
so
Lord.
That's the Musky Hitman, and this is that's the smallmouth.
Good Lord.
This is 5.5, and this is 8.
Good Lord. I love that color too. Like whoever is the painters did a fantastic job.
Well, it's the same guy, that Dennis Perko. That's the smallmouth pattern right there.
Damn, that's really cool.
Hold it where people can really see it well.
And then, guys, please go check out his website to get those ordered. Yeah, glide baits are extremely hot right now. You might want to get on that bite before everyone's throwing them. Then you don't have that advantage anymore. We got Shane Flint Outdoors in the chat. Howdy, bud. Guys, go check out his video on his YouTube channel. He just dropped a Dirty 30 on Hunting Run Reservoir in Virginia. Absolutely gnarly video. We got Gary Fishtails. Good evening, Thomas. No smallmouth or muskie here in Florida, but used to fish for them when I lived up north. Well, Gary, you just want a gift card to Jake's Bait and Tackle. They have an online presence. So, yeah, go shop with them. Get some baits for the old tarpon fishing, for shooting alligators, whatever you're doing down there. As we move closer to that late pre-spawn into the spawn time, when are you going to really start working on bottom bumping presentations? When is that going to become more of a factor in your repertoire?
Well, I'm doing that now too.
Okay.
But yeah, it will probably become more prevalent as we move into, the latter part of pre-spawn, and then of course post-spawn, because, as you get into, June and the summer months, your water's going to get clear and lower, and you really have to start, with more of a finesse presentation. Not that we won't throw any crankbaits, but we're going to really start that switch over. But the kind of this time of year, what our approach is, we'll throw a crankbait or a jerkbait, and those are what we consider search baits. So you cover a lot of water, you can make a lot of casts, and you're just covering a good portion of the river. Whereas, if you're throwing, a Ned rig or a jig or something like that, you're really, having to, it's very slow and you're not covering as much water. So if we find a group of fish, that I reference as a wolf pack sometimes, and you hit a couple on a crankbait or a jerkbait or something like that, then that's a good signal. Like, okay, there's probably a handful of fish here, and we'll have a jig or a Ned rig or something like that, then to throw and try to see if we can really pick up some numbers in a particular area.
We have a great little question here on the Instagram. And then, guys, as always, like I said earlier in the show, StreamYard doesn't let me share questions from Instagram, but we got, what is a good fly pattern this time of year for smallies?
We don't do a lot of fly fishing. We do a little. When I do fly fish, I mean, you just can't go wrong with a woolly bugger. Brown, green, black, that's a great color. And then, a lot of people around here have heard the name Blaine Chocolate. He makes a bait called a Game Changer. It's an articulated bait. I don't have an example of one, but the Game Changer, it's kind of like one of these jointed lures right here, but in a fly, where it has a lot of movement as it's going through the water, and those for me are good smallmouth patterns. And then of course when you get into the summer, you probably going a little bit more on on the popper side, like a Sneaky Pete or some type of a popper. But I probably about 5% of my trips are fly fishing trips. Not that we don't do them. I just have a lot of conventional fishermen that book trips compared to fly fishermen.
That's freaking awesome. And then we got let's see, got a couple more comments here. And then, guys, make sure you get your questions, and I want to make sure we get everyone's questions answered before we finish up here. We have passed the 1 hour mark. Let's see. And then, as always, guys, we do for these Monday Night Lives, the next two people to sign up for Fishing DMV Patreon will receive a bonus gift. Help us in all of our things. We have a new video coming on about that in the direction of the channel later this week. And we got one from Aaron Coons. Aaron Coons on YouTube says, do you have any horror stories about your gear? Like giving a novice a bait caster because they said they knew how to use it?
Not so much on like on a bait caster, but I do remember one thing I always remind my clients of, and it's just kind of a little pet peeve, I guess, of mine. But when you're going down the river, you're going to be in some fast moving water at times. I mean, there's some places that I fish have some class 3 rapids, and and when it's happened a couple times, not a lot. And it's never been intentional, but people will just kind of lazily hang their rod over the side of the boat, and their lure will be sitting in the water. And there was a couple times where I forgot to mention, hey, pull your rod up out of the water and get it in the boat when we're going through some fast rapids. Well, I remember in one case the lure got stuck on something, a piece of wood or rock or something, and just snapped my rod. Lost the bait and that's happened a couple times. I did have somebody one time that got a lure stuck on the bottom of the river, and I always say, hey, open up your bail and let me get position the raft. A lot of times it's just getting to the right angle of the bait, and it'll come right off. And pulling, I'm like, hey, dude, you gotta loosen up the drag there a little bit, open up that bail. And it got real tight, and the whole rod just slipped. Everything went out of his hand and went to the bottom of the river. Lost the whole thing.
And we really talked about a lot of glide baits today. As a guy, it's one thing if you're like an individual or you're fishing tournaments, you're trying to make a living, content creator, but you're a guide where you got to give tackle away. And I've heard an argument on both sides of the fence of like, well, I only want my people to fish quality stuff, so I'm going to buy that. And other people are like, I don't know if I want to spend on all just mega bass jerk baits because I lose 4 of them. I don't make any money on that trip. So how does that work into the whole guiding thing?
Well, on the bass stuff, I don't worry too much about it. I mean, I'll talk about this little guy here in a minute. This is a micro finesse jig, made by Z-Man, peanut butter and jelly. I mean, we've caught more smallmouth, more citations on this bait than we've caught on anything else. Yeah. But as a whole, that whole setup right there is probably $2.50, $3. If you lose a bunch of those, yeah, it adds up. But one of these guys, I hate to have the conversation with my clients on these, but I do, that if they are negligent with one of these baits, like throw it up 30 or 40 foot in a tree, then I'm going to ask for restitution on the bait. But I think it does create a little more caution for them. Fortunately, it's only happened one time. So, and we throw a lot of these. But the other thing about using these baits is, I'm using 100-pound, 80-pound braid and 100-pound fluorocarbon leader. So, you can put in my rods are, really heavy duty. So you can put some pressure on these and they come loose a lot more easily than some of these other baits. But, it's never been horrible. I mean, there's sometimes you have some novice people that are going to lose some tackle, but you have to really factor that into your whole price of doing business, in terms of, what you're charging. So, I kind of keep an eye on my comps and, try to stay pretty equal with them, but, within reason. Now, I do require folks that come fishing with me sign a participation waiver. So it outlines being negligent with equipment. So if somebody's negligent with a rod or they somehow slice, a hole in my raft or something because they were doing something they shouldn't, then we're going to have a conversation about some type of restitution. But, fortunately that's never happened on that side. I did have a guy, had a young son with him one day. It was really hot. And, the son was in the back of the boat. So I wasn't, the way my boat's set up, I can't really see behind me all the time very well. And the kid got bored and he just was kind of in the back of the boat. And he was taking the rod and he was just kind of slapping the back of the water. And he was probably 12 or 13 years old. I just heard him say, "Uh-oh." I'm like, "What happened?" He said, "Oh, I just dropped your rod in the water." And we were in a pretty deep hole. So, I asked his dad, I'm like, "Hey, you're gonna have to reimburse me for that rod. Shouldn't have been doing that."
That's freaking dagger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was but $200, $200, you can't, that'll add up.
That really does freaking add up. Dang, that is freaking insane. When it comes to citations, and I think, like, let me see this. Lance Gary has a really good question here. If I fish the James from Scott's down to Cartersville, there's a lot of citations. How is the size in the upper James? So, and this is kind of like segues back to something that we said earlier. Like, generally speaking, is it more of a volume place for smallmouth versus size, or what is it like?
I think that question. I think the answer to that question is it's more about the time of the year. So right now, it's about size. When we get into, from now until they spawn, when we get into post spawn, which will start a week or two before Memorial Day, and of course run into the end of June, and then you have the summer months. Then you're really talking more. I mean, you're talking more about numbers. That's when you can, if all conditions are right, you can get 70, 75 fish. You might get a couple big ones in there, like in the early morning, or if you're fishing later in the day, late in the evening. But generally speaking, the size of the fish, in post spawn, probably going to run, 12 to 15, 16 inches. And, you might even get some smaller fish. Right now, I mean, like the guy I was talking about that he fished Sunday as well. Well, I was fishing musky. He was over somewhere else fishing small, but I think he said they caught 15 fish, and there wasn't one fish under 16 inches. I mean, they were all just quality fish. And then once you get to the fall, then you start getting into those quality big fish again. So I think it's not necessarily about geography as it is more about time of year.
Got right on, guys. I mean, I learn something every time I do this. We probably will be the last question until somebody gets one in under the buzzard. Gary's fishtails. I like the turret idea on the end of a finesse jig. Sometimes they don't want a lot of action to that bait. I'll keep that in mind. Absolutely.
Yeah, that little Z-Man micro finesse jig right there. This is a 1/8 ounce. I like to use the lightest that I can on this. But, I have just, fished the plain TRD, just like that. But these tentacles right here, you can, because that's the way it sits in the water, it'll drop on the bottom and it's going to sit like that. And you got that tail.
Yeah.
You can dead stick it, and that tail's going to wag around. And then even the tentacles are going to wave around in the water. And you don't really have to do a whole lot with this. But when I started adding that, or I went to this micro finesse jig, and I added that TRD to it, man, it changed everything.
Yeah,
that's that's a Ned rig on steroids right there.
Yeah, that's Ned rig on steroids, or Ned rig in a dress. When do you pick, though, from going with skirt without skirt? Because you're right, that secondary action is important. Is that something that you just always do now, or is it very situational?
It's almost something I always do now. Yeah, I haven't fished the plain Ned rig. I mean, it's not that we never do it, but it's very rare. I mean, it produces all year. I mean, pre-spawn, post-spawn, fall. It's the best bait of everything that I've showed you that for me and my clients, because it just always produces.
That's really cool. And then, guys, this might be the last question of the night here from Shane Flynn Outdoors. Do you track how many citation fish your clients catch each year?
Not necessarily do I have a list or anything, but I would say on average, I think I ran a total of 115 trips last year. We probably boated smallmouth. We probably boated 20 to 25 citations.
Damn.
I don't know exactly, but musky. I mean, like I was telling you earlier, I actually ran more musky trips last year for the first time in my career than I did smallmouth trips. So it was probably 60-40 or 55-45, somewhere around there. But I lost count of how many citation musky. I mean, like I said, 75 to 80% of them were over 40 inches.
Dude, that's freaking awesome. Rob, again, thank you guys so much. Thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. And Chad, thank you guys so much for all the great questions as always. Link in the episode description about everything we talked about. But again, Rob, if people want to book a trip with you or try to find some of those awesome glide baits, where can they go?
Yeah, so if they want to book a trip with me, they can go to my website. It's appbronzebackadv.com. So it's basically an abbreviation for Appalachian Bronzeback Adventures. My phone number's listed on the website, and my Gmail. You can reach me at Gmail, same appbronzebackadv@gmail.com. I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook as Rob England because I post other things, a lot of sports stuff on there. But Rob England, is a lot of fishing stuff on there. I'm on Instagram as Appalachian Bronzeback Adventures. I'm on LinkedIn as Appalachian Bronzeback Adventures. So you can reach me, any of those different ways. And then as far as the Perko baits, his name is Dennis Perko. Now he does not have a website yet. He's in the process of a website. He does most of his stuff on Instagram under Perko Lures.
Awesome.
But if somebody wanted to get in contact with him and couldn't, I talk to him every day.
Rob, again, thank you guys. Thank you so much for coming on today. He's a really busy man. Go book him up. And if you're going to do musky trips, I'm going to assume do not wait for the last minute. Musky trips always book up big time. So give him a call and figure out what he's got going on down the pike for that. Like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps out in the algorithm. Go check us out on Patreon. We're going to be dropping it here. When we hit 600 Patreon subscribers, we're going to be launching our nonprofit. We are allowed by the state of Virginia and Maryland to do supplemental stocking. So we're going to be trying to attack the smallmouth situation in our states and also anywhere else that we can help out the fishing world. Like and subscribe to the channel, and we will see you next time on Fishing the DMV. Bye. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your hosts, Thomas Ahrens and Jared Mounts. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester,